All right, thanks to an online group I'm in, I managed to get an early screening of the 2021 adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune last week. I'd seen the 1980s film. I even did a podcast 1980s film, and also the early 2000s Sci-Fi Channel original miniseries. So I was definitely looking forward to this one getting the Lord of the Rings treatment. Heck, owing to COVID concerns, I said earlier I'd see this movie in a spacesuit. That ended up not happening because they delayed the release about a year, but how was it when I finally saw it? Here we go. So let's start with the plot. In a space empire thousands of years in the future, the noble House Atreides is headed by Duke Leto, Oscar Isaac. You might have seen him in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. And he's granted the planet Arrakis as a fief by the Emperor Shaddam IV. This means that the Emperor has taken away from the rival House Harkonnen, headed by nefarious Baron Vladimir, played by Stellan Skarsgård, I think it's pronounced. Now, Arrakis is so valuable because it's the sole source of something called the spice melange, which the navigators use it to guide starships faster than light without advanced computers, because this is a society where they're so afraid of thinking machines that everything important has to be done by humans. And therefore, this is a very, very valuable planet. However, to quote the great Admiral Akbar, it's a trap. The jealous emperor seeks to destroy Duke Leto, who he views as a rival. Now, in this whole mix comes Duke Leto's son Paul, played by Timothée Chalamet, and his mother Jessica, who is a Bene Gesserit, sort of an order of space witches with psychic powers. And Jessica has trained Paul in Bene Gesserit techniques like the use of the voice, like you can command people just by speaking in a certain tone. And also, Paul has been having visions. And these are visions of the future, including a galaxy-wide war. And there's a young woman, Chani, played by Zendaya, who keeps popping up in them. And she's part of the Fremen, the free men of Dune, the Arrakis' native population. So they arrive on Arrakis. The Emperor and his Harkonnen allies begin their nefarious plot. And so will Paul be able to draw on the quote-unquote desert power envisioned by his father? Well, that will be in the sequel, so let's hope enough of you all see this one to make it worthwhile. So let's start with the stuff I enjoyed. So the cinematography in this movie is just awesome. It is a beautiful, beautiful film, and I cannot say this enough. So the Atreides homeworld of Caladan is just beautiful, magnificent coasts and oceans. And meanwhile, the Harkonnen rule over a polluted urban hellscape. Now, Salusa Secundus, which is where the Emperor draws on his elite Sardaukar soldiers, is like this weird mix of the two. Like it's raining, but it's still scary and goth. And they managed to make the Sardaukar kind of disturbing, and that's good. Like in the books, they're referred to as the Emperor's soldier fanatics, and we get some weird, almost Uruk-hai level stuff here. Now, the 1980s adaptation had several, but this is the worst flaw, was the very clumsily handled exposition needed for this gigantic science fiction universe. Like they had people handing out booklets in the theater entrances, and and they have an opening like monologue where Princess Irulan describes everything, and they don't even bother with that here. So they just do shots or small gestures to show rather than tell. Like, for example, they don't explain that advanced computers are illegal, and therefore mentats, who are specially trained humans, have pretty much replaced computers. Instead, you just see the Atreides mentat Thufir Hawat, played by Stephen McKinley Henderson, do this weird thing with his eyes a couple times, then he calculates something that way. And meanwhile, the Harkonnens have a mentat named Peter de Vries, played by David Dastmalchian, who I think does the same thing. You also are shown that the Atreides are benign and the Harkonnens are evil. Like Duke Leto is real free and easy with visitors to Caladan and Arrakis, and no one minds that Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, the Atreides, military commander, is always hugging Paul and saying, "Oh, my boy." Meanwhile, whenever we see the Baron, people are always bowing and cringing before him or before his nephew, Glossu, the Beast, Raban, played by Dave Bautista. And meanwhile, Jessica, the Duke's concubine, she was a member of the Bene Gesserit before kind of disobeying their orders, and we'll get more of that later. And you see a lot of glances between them and short conversations. It's not a lot of blah, blah, blah backstory. So everything is handled so smoothly, even though this is something that could easily turn into info dump hell. Also, there are some real subtle touches of characterization I like when Paul and Leto are having a conversation before they leave Caladan for Arrakis. Leto tells Paul that he didn't want to be the Duke either. He wanted to be a pilot, and his father actually went along with this because he knew this would bring him around to his responsibilities, quote, another way. So you actually see Duke Leto flying an aircraft a couple of times. That comes in real handy both for Duke Leto and for Paul, who apparently trained with him. And Leto's father was killed fighting bulls to the entertainment of the commoners. So the severed head of that bull gets shown a lot in this movie, foreshadowing. That part's really well done. And you should definitely see this movie in IMAX. That's why I saw it, because not only do you get the full scope of the visuals, you get the full force of the soundtrack, a lot of drums and really super low frequency sounds. It will crush the life out of you in a good way. It's really well done. And now the acting of the main characters is impressive. So Chalamet does a good job of portraying Paul, who in the books is 15. So he's rebellious, emotionally sensitive, and very gifted. And there's also Steele in there that's going to be important when he starts seeking his destiny, as will become the Mahdi of the Fremen. Isaac is noble as Duke Leto, and Rebecca Ferguson is really good as Jessica, Paul's mother. And I was kind of skeptical of how they gender flipped Liet Kynes, the imperial scientist who's studying Arrakis. In the book, he was a man. Yeah. But Sharon Duncan Brewster plays her very well, especially later in the film when things all go to hell. And we have Josh Brolin. He plays Gurney Halleck, the Atreides weapons master, and he's also a musician. And Jace Momoa, he does a good job as Duncan Idaho, who's real jocular and fun, but will also kill you in various ways. And there's some really good battle sequences. Like they go into a lot more detail in various fight scenes. I go into more for reasons of spoilers, but they plan out the techniques and choreography well. So in Dune, thanks to personal shielding, firearms are at best secondary. So there's a lot more sword fighting, but they choreograph how to fight with swords and energy shields and how you might get around energy shields using firearms of various kinds. And it's really clever and well done. I was impressed. However, I spent the last few minutes gushing how great it is. There are still flaws. So this movie is just over 2.5 hours long. It really kind of starts to drag 2 hours in, and that's only the first half of the story. So that's the single biggest flaw and kind of a big one. And they still leave stuff out. Like there's a character who has a lot of internal turmoil and plays a major role in the events of the book. He's almost a non-entity. Like if I hadn't known what was going to happen, I'd be like, what? And then I'm wondering if they're consolidating the Baron's nephews, because we meet Rabban early, but Rabban is kind of dumb muscle. Fade Rotha is the smarter and the more dangerous of the nephews. And I don't even remember Fade Rotha being even mentioned. And he's really important, especially in the second part of the book. So that's kind of an issue. Also, Dune takes place 20,000 years in the future, but some of the character's speech comes off as very present day. Like a character is talking about somebody being a freak. Like he sounds like a modern character, being angsty. Still, I'd give it a B, maybe an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. Go see it. Go see it now. I want to help this movie make enough money that they're going to make a sequel that's just as well made, because the second half of the book is about the war between the Fremen and the Harkonnens and the Empire. And if they do that with this degree of production values, it will be just awesome. So again, go see it. This movie is great.